Welcome back once again to the Young Archaeologists Club at Newcastle University. Today we have a special guest with us to help us learn all about prehistoric pottery. First of all, we'll hear about the different types of pottery found in prehistory and what archaeologists do with it. Then we'll take a closer look at some reproductions of different types of pot. And finally, we'll get to make our own version of a prehistoric pot. But first of all, what is prehistoric pottery and why is it so interesting? Today, pottery and ceramics is something which most of us take for granted. They're everyday objects. While many of us know someone with a best set of china, for the most part, pottery is an everyday artifact. It's used every day for eating and drinking, and if it's broken, it's relatively inexpensive to replace. But archaeology shows us that pottery hasn't always been a part of our lives. The Neolithic saw a fundamental shift in the way that people lived in the landscape. They settled in one place, they began to farm, and with this revolutionary new lifestyle came pottery. Such pots were clay, simply fired, in a fire. While this sounds straightforward, there was skill involved in making pots that were useful, that didn't crack. Early Neolithic pottery tended to have a round bottom. We'll take a closer look at this in a moment. In the later Neolithic, pots were increasingly complex in their decorative design and had flat bottoms. Over the centuries, as you might expect, the design of pots, their use and their associations changed. One of the most famous types of pottery in all of history comes from the Bronze Age. So-called beaker pots were popular across Europe. They are seemingly associated with high status and having access, for example, to bronze. So loved was this pottery that people took it with them to their graves. The Amesbury Archer is a famous so-called beaker burial. The Bronze Age also saw giant collared urns being produced. These collars were probably there to help tie lids over the top of the pots. This is a little like the lids you might have seen on jam jars. On into the Iron Age, pottery continued to develop. More regional variations began to emerge. But it's worthwhile remembering something. None of this pottery was made using a potter's wheel. So-called wheel-thrown pottery really came to Britain at the end of the Iron Age, possibly even with the Romans. So remember, prehistoric pottery did not use a wheel. This is good for us, because in a moment we'll be able to have a go at making a pot without needing to go and get a potter's wheel. But first, you may be wondering, why do archaeologists care about ancient pottery? What does it tell us about people in the past? Prehistoric pottery is extremely useful evidence. First of all, it confirms that people in the past could make pottery. Secondly, it tells us about the style of pottery that they were making as we reconstruct the pots, or even if we're lucky enough to get a whole pot out of the ground. It tells us about how the pots were made, how the pots were traded over distances if we find one type of pot in another place in the country. The style of the pots helps us to date the period which they came from as styles develop over time. And occasionally, if we're really lucky, pots may even have residue inside of the food or drink or the contents which the pot once contained. Sometimes pottery even contains human remains in the form of cremations. So prehistoric pottery is extremely important to archaeologists. Now let's take a closer look at some particular pots.
Alright, the Neolithic, what you find is you've got mostly round-bottomed pots. Round-bottomed pots that are smooth, often very lightly decorated. This is somewhat heavily decorated, but they start off really, really plain. The round bottoms sit really nicely. If you've got a rough floor, a rough surface, this pot will always find three little points it can sit on. It'll settle down, it'll sit there nicely. If you've got flat bottom pots on a really rough floor, they tend to rock around. So round bottom pots, definitely the order of the day for the early Neolithic. As time goes on, people start to make flat-bottomed pots, and these are grooved ware pots, the first seriously flat-bottomed pots we get in Britain. Very heavily decorated now, lots of decoration on there, sometimes evidence of mats and things that they've been built upon on the bottom surface. But these start off in Orkney, far north of Scotland. They start off being made and used in small houses, but small houses that have now got shelves to put things in. And I do think that flat-bottomed pots tell us a lot about what's going on inside houses. In Orkney, you can go out and find yourself a nice big flat flagstone and make yourself a set of shelves with it. Around about 2500 BC, new things start to come into the country. First of all, copper, followed very closely by bronze. And these are materials that allow you to make tools. They allow you to make tools that will work wood more easily than the old flint tools would have, and it allows you to create planks, flat surfaces and that sort of thing. As a result, most Bronze Age pottery is flat-bottomed. And the first of the Bronze Age pottery that comes into the country is this stuff, beaker. Beaker pottery, and it's seen in Northern Europe, in Holland and Germany before it arrives in Britain, and it comes into the country probably with the metals. It comes certainly with new cultural things, so it seems, and possibly new foods, new drinks, that sort of thing. What also happens in the Bronze Age is you start to see much more decorated pottery. Pots that are really quite elaborate, pots that have taken quite a long time to work on. And also a really wide range of forms start to develop, from small little objects right up to great big urns, huge pots, some of which were used for brewing and that sort of thing. But there are also a lot of pots for which we've no idea their function. We don't know what they're for. This one here is known as the Oldbourne cup, but it's only one among many. Sometimes these are called incense cups or accessory vessels. They're found in burials, all sorts of different forms and shapes. This one's got two little holes here. It's got two pierced holes in there. It's got decoration on the top, on the underside, on the outside, inside, everywhere. I replicated this one, and it takes hours to do. Somebody spent a lot of time making a very small vessel for which we don't know the function. They're often found with some burning inside, resulting in people suggesting that they're for burning incense or lamps or things like that. We just don't know. We really don't know. It may be, and this one was found, I think, with a cremation burial, it may be they're used for carrying a hot coal to light a fire, and therefore you take that from maybe the hearth in the hut to the pyre, and you light a fire with it. We really don't know. So these are enigmatic vessels. These let us debate what's happening and give us things to puzzle us.
Now it's time to have a go at making some prehistoric pottery.
You're all going to make a pot today. A small pot, nothing like my big urns or anything like that. And you're going to be using this clay that I've brought with me. Now, this is a red terracotta clay with a lot of grit in it. Most prehistoric pottery has a lot of grit in it. You know, we said it was fired in open fires. Well, to survive that, to survive being put into really hot conditions really quite quickly, it needs to be clay with a lot of grit in it. So the clay you'll get today, you'll feel it when you start to work with it. It's got sand and grit inside there. The clay I'm working with today is sort of clean stuff that you can quite happily make pots with. Now, I said we're going to make one small pot. I'm going to give you a choice. I'm going to give you a choice of being a Stone Age person or a Bronze Age person. So, who can tell me which is which? Who thinks that's the Bronze Age pot? Who thinks that's the Stone Age pot? Yeah. Hey, excellent, good stuff. And this, of course, is the Bronze Age beaker. There we go. So, Bronze Age, Stone Age. To make either of them, the starting point's the same. I'm going to give you a ball of clay, and I want you to roll it into a nice round ball of clay. The smoother and rounder it is when you start, the better. And you'll see I do it like that. I sort of pat it in the palms of my hands. But you can do it with a roll. Try not to roll it on the table. It really doesn't help very much. Roll it between your hands or pat it between your hands, and you get a nice round ball of clay to start off with. And you know, I said before, we're not going to do it with the sausage way. We're not. We're going to make a pinch pot. Now, we're making a small pot, so you start with a small ball of clay. I can make a pinch pot from a ball of clay that I can hold in my hand. If I need to make it bigger, I will add some big sausages of clay to that and I'll carry on pinching. But basically, what you're going to do today is just the one lump pot. And what you're going to do, press your thumb down at the top to start it. Make a dent. I'm not giving you any clay because I want you to watch me at the moment, all right? Press your thumb into the pot, make a dent, turn it around a little bit, make that same dent a little bit deeper. Turn it around, make it a little bit deeper. Turn it around, make it a little bit deeper. Getting boring now, isn't it? Get it around, make it a bit deeper. And the reason I do it like this is because I could just shove my thumb straight to the bottom, but my thumb's not round, and I want a round hole in there. So if I do it like this, press down, turn round, press down, turn round. I'm not drilling my thumb into there. Press down, turn round. Eventually, you'll get down, and you'll sort of be able to feel a little bit of pressure from your thumb onto the palm of your hand coming through there. You don't want this to be paper thin. You want it to be about the thickness of a chocolate bar at the very bottom there. Once you get down there, hold the pot up on your thumb. Doesn't help, just looks really silly. So you know, it's just really good. But it tells you that you've done the right thing. If you can hold it up on your thumb like that, you've done the right thing. Fingers like that, wrap them round the pot, just like that. Pinch, turn, pinch, turn, pinch, turn, pinch, turn. Do you see I turn it just a little tiny bit? Pinch, turn, pinch, turn, pinch. Just turn it a little tiny bit. And once I've gone round there a couple of times, I'll be starting to thin that pot out so that it's only a few millimetres thick. Wants to be, again, about the thickness of a decent chocolate bar, a biscuit, that sort of thing. Keep going round, 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 round. And what you'll end up with is a little bowl like that. Now, our carinated bowl, and this is what's called the carination. It's that sharp bit there that turns round. What we're going to do is we're going to make that carination. You remember, we've had our thumb inside and our fingers wrapped round. I'm going to change. I'm going to put my thumb on the outside and my fingers on the inside. And this time my thumb is sort of in line with the rim of the pot. And I'm going to go pinch, turn, pinch, turn, pinch, turn, pinch, turn, all the way around this way. So I'm pinch and turn, pinch and turn, pinch and turn. And I've got myself straight away. You can see that shape starting to develop. You can see that shape starts to come out of just doing that. And if you keep doing that for a minute or so and make it get gentler and gentler and gentler, how you're pressing on there just to smooth out the surface, getting rid of any humps and bumps, you can go back, you can do that a little bit there, and you'll have made yourself a little Neolithic bowl.
Brilliant.
Now, making the beaker, same sort of idea. But this time you're going to have to be a bit more controlled because you've evolved. You've evolved into a Bronze Age person. Now, you're 1,000 years or so ahead of this. You're a couple of thousand years ahead of this. You've gone a long way now. So this time, you start off the same way. Round ball, thumb down the middle, straight down, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around. But we don't want a bowl anymore. We want something quite tall. And the way I do that is I put the ball of clay sideways in my hand, and when I'm pinching, I use my fingers straight down the side, thumb inside, pinch, and you give a little grip with this hand at the same time. And if you do that, if you give a little grip with your hand and a little pinch as you go, I'm doing this really fast now, what happens is you start to make a sort of cylinder shape. You're making a cylinder shape rather than a bowl shape. You see how that hand's doing that little grip? The whole thing's sideways in my hand, and I'm doing it that way. And what you start to get is you start to get a much taller vessel. We're going to turn around again. I'm going to use my thumb on the outside and my fingers on the inside. This time, instead of pressing in to get that change of thing, I'm going to use my thumb to press upwards a little bit, up towards my fingers, up, all the way around. I'm going to go really fast here. A little beaker. Now, be careful. What you don't want is you don't want your clay to be paper thin. You want it to be sort of thick enough so that it holds together nicely. If it starts to feel really thin, you're going a bit too far. If the worst comes to the worst, clay's wonderful stuff. You can turn it back into a ball of clay again and you can start again. So there's no shame in doing that. Once you get to there, you're most of the way to making your beaker. If we're going to make this kind of beaker, I'm going to put my fingers back inside there. I'm going to give a little push down the bottom there, a little push outwards near the bottom. Round, 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 round. Sweep that, push that in a little bit there. Turn it outwards. We're going to have a little teeny tiny beaker. And I'm doing this really fast now. You can see we're starting to get to that beaker shape. And if you spend the next 10 minutes just very gently, just shaping, you'll have a beaker. Everybody's sort of got fairly well on with their pots. Some of you finished, some of you not. What I'd like you all to do is just to stop working on your pots for a second and just watch me, because I'm going to show you some of the decorating tools you might like to use. Now, this is my Neolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age toolkit. It has all sorts of things in it that I use for decorating the pots. And if you found it in the street, you might be inclined to sweep it up and throw it in a dustbin, because it is very odd objects. There's bits of stone, there's bits of bone, there's bits of horn, there's bits of cord, all sorts of things in here. And I'll show you a few of them now. I'm going to put them scattered around the table so that everybody can get at bits and pieces. Bone impressions, quite a common thing in prehistoric pottery. So you'll find there's quite a few bones in here, and the bone impressions are just the end of the bone, usually just the tip of the bone. And in this case, if I press this one in, this bird bone leg, I'll get a pattern that looks a little bit like little butterflies on the side of the pot. So that's quite a common one. But you also get bones used so as you're just producing a little ring from them. So bones that have been cut off to make a little ring. So you might want to just gently press that into the pot. And it does just need a little gentle pressure. Don't press so hard that you punch right through onto the inside. String's really common, and you'll find quite a few bits of string in here of different thicknesses. Some of those bits of string are mounted on bows like this. There's a bow-mounted piece of string. And the reason for that is, on the Amesbury Archer and Boscombe Bowman beakers, they're decorated with really straight lines of cording, which is really difficult to do if you just use a free piece of string. But if you stretch it on a bow, you can get really nice straight lines. So in this case, I can press straight lines of cord decoration. It's twisted cord, so it leaves a little pattern in there. But you'll also find there's various bits of other cord in here, and also bits of the stuff it's made from, because it's made from bark, most of it, the bark of a lime tree, and some of it's made from flax. So the lime tree bark is quite hard, and you can actually press that into the surface of the pots. Now, the reason I use the real thing rather than just modern string when I'm doing this is modern string's much too even. It's much too even a twist. So I've got to twist my own string, because otherwise I don't get anything that looks right. So you'll find I use that sort of stuff. There's bits of flint in here. Do be a little bit careful. I think I've got rid of all the really sharp bits of flint, but there are bits of flint. Quite often in pots you'll see that people have just pressed the piece of flint in repeatedly, making designs, and it's really obvious when flint's been used, because it produces these little triangular cuts into the pot. So there's bits of flint. There's a couple of little toothy combs with little tiny teeth in them. Those are used not to scratch onto the pot, but they're used to press in. And what you do is you sort of roll them across the surface of the pot, and you'll produce dotted lines that looks like it means tear here on the pot. So you've got little dotted lines going across the pot. There's bits of shell. There are maggots. Here's a maggot. These are the maggot. In actual fact, I've got them as rings. You can press them into the pot, you get those little marks that look like a little bug's been pressed in there. And the reason I make them like rings is because in the Hancock collection there's a Mortlake bowl, one of those round bottom bowls, and on the bottom of it, as well as the decoration around the top, on the bottom of it there's quite a few random little marks on there, and I think whoever made it had that ring on their finger, and they pressed it in, and then at the end they went and finished the bottom of the pot off, and they just went like inside the pot like that, and they made lots of random marks on the bottom. So I wear mine as a ring. See those little rings? They're maggots. Stones can be used for pressing into the surface. Again, there's a really nice pot from the Ingram Valley, from Turf Now, that has ribs up it, and that's been done by just pressing a stone into it to create this sort of ribbed pattern in it.
Making a prehistoric pot is something that you can do in the classroom or at home. Remember to have fun. And there's not really a right or wrong way to decorate your pot. So long as the pattern repeats and you find it pleasing, then people in prehistory would probably agree with you. But remember to decide whether you're going to make a Neolithic pot or a Bronze Age pot. If you would like to know more about the Young Archaeologists Club at Newcastle University, check out this link.